The front desk clerk didn't even look up at first. Her fingers moved across the keyboard as she shook her head slightly and said, "I'm sorry, sir. There are no rooms available." Muhammad Ali stood there quietly. No argument. No frustration. Just a man holding a small travel bag, listening. The lobby was bright with afternoon light. Business travelers passed by. A bellhop rolled luggage across the floor. Phones rang softly behind the desk. Everything felt routine, ordinary, uneventful. Ali adjusted his grip on the bag and smiled politely. "Are you sure?" he asked calmly. The clerk glanced at him for a moment, his clothes, his posture, and then repeated herself, firmer this time. "Yes, sir. We're fully booked." There was no apology in her voice now. Just dismissal. A nearby manager overheard the exchange and stepped closer. He didn't ask questions. He didn't check the system. He simply backed up the clerk's answer. "No rooms," he said flatly. "You'll need to find another hotel." Ali nodded slowly. People in the lobby barely noticed. To them, it was just another guest being turned away. These things happened every day. But what the staff didn't realize, what no one in that lobby realized, was that the man standing in front of them wasn't asking for special treatment. He was testing something far more important. Muhammad Ali wasn't there as a celebrity. He wasn't there as a world champion. He wasn't there to announce who he was. He wanted to see how he would be treated when no one thought he mattered. So instead of arguing, instead of revealing his identity, Ali simply stepped aside and sat down in the lobby. He placed his bag at his feet. And he made a phone call. His voice stayed calm, controlled, respectful. There was no anger in his expression, only disappointment. Because in that quiet moment, the situation stopped being about a hotel room. It became about judgment, about respect, about how easily people dismiss others based on appearance alone. And while the staff went back to their work, believing the moment was over, a clock had quietly started ticking. Within 9 minutes, everything in that hotel was about to change. It was a normal afternoon at the hotel, the kind of day that blended quietly into every other day before it. Sunlight filtered through the tall glass doors at the entrance, casting soft reflections across the marble floor. Guests moved in and out at an unhurried pace, some dragging wheeled suitcases, others checking their watches as they waited for rides. The steady hum of conversation filled the lobby, interrupted only by the gentle ring of the front desk phone and the occasional call for housekeeping over the radio. Behind the counter, staff followed routine without thinking much about it. Check-in forms were printed. Room keys were slid across the desk. Credit cards were returned with practiced smiles. Everything ran on habit. Muhammad Ali walked in quietly, almost unnoticed. There were no cameras flashing. No whispers spreading across the room. No sudden pause in conversation. He wore simple clothes, nothing that hinted at fame or fortune. No expensive accessories. No attempt to stand out. He carried his own bag and moved at his own pace, calm and unhurried. Ali had traveled like this many times before. Not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. He understood something most people never think about. The way you are treated when no one knows who you are reveals more truth than when everyone does. Fame changes behavior. Power distorts honesty. Respect becomes conditional. So he chose anonymity. As he waited near the desk earlier, no one had rushed to assist him. No one had smiled a little wider. No one had asked if he needed anything else. To the staff, he blended into the background like just another traveler passing through. And that was fine with him. Nearby, a family discussed their plans for the evening. A business traveler typed rapidly on his phone, pacing near the elevators. A bellhop leaned casually against a pillar, waiting for his next task. Life moved forward without interruption. Ali took it all in quietly. He noticed how smoothly the hotel ran when nothing went wrong. How confident the staff seemed when they believed they were in control. How easy it was for people to overlook someone who didn't demand attention. This was the normal world, a place of routine, comfort, and assumptions. No tension yet. No conflict on the surface. Just an ordinary afternoon where everyone believed they understood their roles. To the hotel staff, Ali was simply another man who had arrived too late to get a room. Someone who would leave, slightly inconvenienced, and be forgotten within minutes. They had no idea that he was watching not just what they were doing, but how they were doing it. How quickly they dismissed him. How easily they made judgments. How little effort it took to treat someone as unimportant. Ali didn't interrupt the flow of the lobby. He didn't challenge anyone. He didn't announce himself. He allowed the moment to exist exactly as it was. Because sometimes, the calm before the storm isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it's polite. Sometimes, it's quiet. And sometimes, it looks just like a normal afternoon, right before everything changes. When Muhammad Ali stepped up to the front desk, the clerk barely looked up from her screen. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she spoke, her voice automatic and rehearsed. "We're fully booked," she said, already reaching for the next form. Ali didn't react. He smiled politely, the kind of smile that carried patience rather than expectation, and gave a small nod. "That's all right," he said calmly. "I'll wait." For a brief moment, everything stayed the same. The clerk shrugged slightly, assuming he would move on. The line behind him shifted. The soft rhythm of the lobby continued uninterrupted. But then something changed. A manager standing a few steps away noticed Ali lingering near the desk. His eyes traveled quickly, taking in Ali's clothes, his simple bag, the way he stood quietly without demanding attention. The manager leaned in and whispered something to the clerk. Ali didn't hear the words, but he saw the reaction. The clerk straightened. Her expression hardened. The casual politeness disappeared, replaced by distance. The manager stepped forward, inserting himself into the conversation. "No rooms," he said firmly, louder than necessary. "And even if something opens up, it won't be available to you." The words landed heavier than the first refusal. This wasn't about availability anymore. It was about exclusion. A few nearby guests paused, sensing the shift in tone. A woman waiting behind Ali glanced toward the desk, her eyebrows tightening. A man sitting near the lobby chairs lowered his phone, watching quietly. The atmosphere changed, not dramatically, but unmistakably. Ali remained still. He didn't argue. He didn't question the system. He didn't ask to speak to someone higher up. Instead, he looked at the manager for a moment, calm, observant, unreadable. Then he nodded. "All right," he said softly. But behind that calm exterior, Ali was fully aware of what had just happened. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't poor communication. It was a judgment call. He had been measured in seconds, by appearance, by assumptions, by the belief that he didn't matter enough to deserve patience or courtesy. And that realization mattered far more than the room itself. The manager turned away, satisfied, believing the situation was over. The clerk went back to typing. The line resumed its slow movement. But the tension lingered. People could feel it, even if they couldn't explain why. Ali stepped away from the desk, his movements unhurried. He chose a seat in the lobby where he could see everything clearly: the desk, the staff, the guests moving through their routines. He set his bag down carefully and folded his hands. From the outside, it looked like acceptance. But inside, Ali was paying attention. He noticed how quickly respect had disappeared. How confidence turned into dismissal. How easily power was exercised when no one expected consequences. This was no longer about a hotel stay. It was about how people behave when they believe their decisions won't be questioned. Ali had spent his life being underestimated, misjudged, and dismissed, long before the world knew his name. He knew the difference between a mistake and a message. And this message was clear. So he waited. Not in anger. Not in frustration. But with quiet certainty. Because the moment of disrespect had already passed. And what came next would define everything that followed. Muhammad Ali stepped away from the front desk without a word. No dramatic pause. No sharp looks over his shoulder. Just a calm turn, as if he had accepted the situation and chosen to move on. He walked slowly across the lobby and stopped near a quiet corner, where the noise softened and the flow of guests thinned. Sunlight spilled in through the windows, warming the floor beneath his feet. He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. Then he made a call. No shouting. No raised voice. No threats disguised as authority. Just calm words, spoken clearly and without emotion. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked unimportant, like any other traveler making arrangements after being turned away. The staff didn't pay attention. The manager didn't look back. In their minds, the situation was already resolved. But Ollie knew better. He wasn't angry. Anger was loud. Anger was reactive. And anger often said more about the person feeling it than the person causing it. This was something else. He felt disappointment, not just for himself, but for what the moment revealed. Because this had stopped being about a hotel room the instant the tone changed at the desk. The instant courtesy was replaced with judgment. The instant a decision was made based not on policy, but perception. Ollie had seen this before, long before fame followed him everywhere. He remembered what it felt like to be dismissed, to be underestimated, to be treated as invisible. He remembered how easily people could strip respect away when they believed it wouldn't cost them anything. That's what made this moment important. Not the words that were spoken, but the confidence with which they were said. The certainty that there would be no consequences. The assumption that kindness was optional. Ollie ended the call and lowered the phone. He didn't move right away. Instead, he sat down and waited. He watched the staff continue their routines, unaware. He noticed how relaxed they looked now that they believed the situation was finished. How comfortable they seemed in their authority. And Ollie understood something clearly. Power doesn't reveal itself when things are going well. It reveals itself when people think no one is watching. This wasn't a test of patience, it was a test of character. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want embarrassment. What he wanted was accountability. Because if this was how one man was treated quietly in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, how many others had experienced the same thing and simply walked away? How many people had been dismissed, judged, or denied dignity without ever being heard? Ollie knew his name carried weight. And he also knew that weight meant responsibility. So he chose not to interrupt. Not to demand. Not to reveal himself too soon. He let the moment breathe. Because true authority doesn't rush. It doesn't need to prove itself. It waits, confident that when the truth arrives, it will speak for itself. The staff had no idea that a decision had already been made. Not a decision fueled by anger, but one rooted in principle. A decision about standards. About behavior. About what kind of treatment would be tolerated under his name. Ollie sat quietly, hands folded, eyes calm. From the outside, it looked like nothing was happening. But inside that lobby, the balance had already shifted. The room was the same. The people were the same. But the outcome was no longer in their hands. And all of it, every consequence that would soon follow, had begun with a single, quiet phone call. 9 minutes passed. To the staff behind the desk, it felt like nothing more than another quiet stretch in the afternoon. Guests continued to move through the lobby. A bell chimed softly as the front doors opened and closed. The earlier tension had faded into the background, replaced by routine once again. Then the doors opened one more time. A man stepped inside with purpose. He didn't pause to take in the lobby. Didn't glance at the desk staff. Didn't slow his pace. He walked straight through the center of the room, his eyes fixed on one person, and when he saw him, he stopped cold. There, seated calmly with his bag at his feet, was Muhammad Ali. For a brief second, the man simply stared. Then his voice dropped, almost instinctively. "Champ," he said softly. The word carried weight. Heads turned. The sound cut through the lobby like a sudden silence between notes of music. Conversations slowed. Movements paused. Something had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Behind the desk, the clerk's fingers froze above the keyboard. The manager followed the man's gaze, and when recognition hit, the color drained from his face. His confident posture collapsed. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. This wasn't just a guest. This was Muhammad Ali, the man they had dismissed, the man they had spoken over, the man they had quietly decided didn't deserve courtesy. Ali stood up slowly. No rush. No drama. The owner stepped closer, clearly shaken, and extended his hand. "I had no idea you were here," he said, his tone respectful, almost apologetic. Ali didn't take the hand right away. He turned instead toward the front desk. The entire staff stood frozen, caught between fear and disbelief. The lobby had gone completely quiet now. Even the background noise seemed to fade, as if the building itself was listening. Ali's expression remained calm, but his eyes were steady, focused. He looked at the manager. Then he asked a single question. "Is this how you treat your guests?" No accusation. No raised voice. Just a question. But it landed harder than any shout could have. No one answered. The manager swallowed hard, his earlier authority gone. The clerk stared at the counter, unable to look up. Other staff members stood stiffly, suddenly aware of every word that had been spoken earlier, and how clearly it had been heard now. The silence stretched. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a revealing one. Because in that moment, there were no excuses left. No misunderstandings to hide behind. The behavior had been exposed exactly as it was: judgment without cause, dismissal without respect. The owner turned slowly toward his staff, his face tight with realization. He didn't need an explanation. The truth was written across the room. Ali had never asked for special treatment. He had only asked to be treated like any other guest. And they had failed. The lobby remained still, every eye fixed on the exchange. No one reached for a phone. No one whispered. Everyone understood that they were witnessing something bigger than a simple confrontation. This wasn't about status being revealed. It was about character being exposed. Ali stood quietly, waiting, not for an apology, not for attention, but for acknowledgement. Because respect, once broken, doesn't return with noise. It returns with accountability. And in that silent lobby, with every role suddenly reversed, the consequences were no longer avoidable. They were about to begin. Muhammad Ali didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He didn't humiliate anyone. In fact, his tone never changed at all. He stood there calmly, the same way he had stood at the desk minutes earlier, only now, the power in the room had shifted completely. Ali looked at the manager first. Not with anger, but with clarity. "You judged a man by how he looked," he said evenly, "and forgot who he might be." The words were simple, but they landed hard, because everyone understood what he meant. This wasn't about recognizing a famous face. This wasn't about treating an owner differently. This was about how easily respect had been denied when no one thought it mattered. Ali let the silence sit for a moment. Not to intimidate, but to allow the truth to settle. Then he continued, his voice steady. "If this is how you treat someone you think has no power," he said, "then this is not the kind of service that should exist in this building." The manager's shoulders dropped. The clerk's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them together. The supervisors nearby avoided eye contact, suddenly aware that every choice they had made was now being examined under a clear light. Ali turned to the owner. "I didn't come here for a room," he said. "I came here quietly, as a guest, like anyone else." He paused, and I was dismissed. There was no accusation in his voice, only fact. The owner nodded slowly, his face tight with understanding. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend his staff. He knew there was nothing to explain away. Ali had given them an opportunity to do the right thing earlier. They had chosen not to. Then Ali made his decision. Not quickly. Not emotionally. Deliberately. He looked back toward the desk. "Everyone involved in this," he said calmly, "will be relieved of their duties immediately." The words echoed through the lobby. The clerk's eyes widened. The manager exhaled sharply. The supervisors stiffened. But Ali didn't stop there. "This isn't about punishment," he added. "It's about standards." He explained that what happened wasn't a single mistake, it was a shared behavior. A system that allowed judgment to replace professionalism. A culture that believed courtesy was optional. And that, Ali said, is unacceptable. No insults. No raised tone. No personal attacks. Just accountability. The owner confirmed the decision without hesitation. Security quietly stepped forward, not to remove anyone forcefully, but to escort them away with dignity. There was no shouting. No arguing. No scene. The consequences were firm, but controlled. Guests watched in silence, realizing they weren't witnessing cruelty. They were witnessing leadership. Because Ali didn't enjoy this moment. There was no satisfaction on his face. No sense of victory. Only resolve. He understood that authority wasn't about making an example out of people, it was about making sure the example mattered. If disrespect went unchecked, it would repeat itself. If judgment had no cost, it would spread. Ali chose to draw the line clearly. Not with anger, but with principle. As the staff were escorted away, the lobby remained quiet. People absorbed what they had just seen. A powerful man who didn't shout. A decision made without rage. A lesson delivered without cruelty. Ali turned slightly, preparing to leave the space where everything had changed. The point had been made. Respect wasn't negotiable. And dignity wasn't optional. The consequences weren't loud, but they were lasting. And everyone in that room knew they would remember this moment long after the afternoon ended. The owner turned to Muhammad Ali with urgency now, his earlier shock replaced by sincerity. "Please," he said, gesturing toward the elevators. "The best suite in the hotel is yours. Whatever you need, anything at all." It was the kind of offer most people would have accepted without hesitation. The room was luxurious, private, and symbolic. A gesture meant to repair the damage, to show respect now that it was unmistakably deserved. Ali listened quietly. Then he shook his head. "I'll stay somewhere else," he said. There was no bitterness in his voice. No pride. No attempt to make a statement for the sake of attention. He simply understood something important. The point had already been made. Accepting the suite wouldn't undo what had happened. It wouldn't change the behavior that had surfaced so easily earlier that afternoon. And it wouldn't teach the lesson that needed to be learned. Ali hadn't come there looking for comfort. He had come, unknowingly at first, into a moment that revealed truth. Truth about how people are treated when they seem unimportant. Truth about how quickly assumptions replace professionalism. Truth about how respect can disappear when no one expects accountability. And once truth is revealed, it doesn't need to be softened. Ali picked up his bag. The lobby remained silent as he walked toward the doors. Guests watched him pass, not with excitement, but with reflection. Some lowered their eyes. Others nodded slightly, as if acknowledging something they hadn't fully understood before. No one applauded. No one spoke. Because what had happened didn't feel like entertainment. It felt like a reminder. Outside, the afternoon continued as it always had. Cars passed. The city moved. Life went on. But inside that hotel, something had changed. The owner stood still for a long moment after Ali left. He looked around at the space, the front desk, the lobby, the place that only an hour earlier had felt routine and predictable. Now it felt exposed. Not because a famous man had walked through it, but because standards had been tested and found lacking. That day became a quiet story, retold not with exaggeration, but with meaning. It wasn't about firings. It wasn't about ownership. It wasn't even really about Muhammad Ali. It was about the way power should be carried. Ali never raised his voice. Never demanded recognition. Never asked to be treated differently. He simply allowed people to show who they were, then responded with principle. And that's why the lesson lasted. Because real power doesn't need noise. It doesn't need humiliation. And it doesn't need anger to be effective. Real power is calm. It's patient. And it's rooted in values that don't change based on who's watching. Respect should never depend on clothing, status, or assumptions. It shouldn't require fame to activate. And it shouldn't disappear just because someone believes they'll never be held accountable. Ali understood that dignity isn't something you give only to the powerful. It's something you give to everyone, or you don't truly understand it at all. That afternoon reminded everyone who witnessed it, directly or indirectly, of something simple and uncomfortable. The way you treat the least important person in the room says more about you than the way you treat the most important one. And that is why the story endured. Not because a man lost his job. Not because a celebrity was involved. But because one quiet decision proved something timeless. You never know who you're standing in front of. And more importantly, you never know who you're revealing yourself to be.